Welcome back to Open Window Politics. Today we're going to be doing a prediction between the current Democratic governor of Kentucky, Andy Beshear, versus the current vice president and most likely Republican frontrunner for the 2028 nomination, J.D. Vance. So J.D. Vance, of course, was a former senator from Ohio, as well as an author. He was picked by Trump to be the running mate in 2020, to be his running mate in 2024. Ultimately, they ended up winning, so Vance is now the vice president. Andy Beshear also has a bit of an interesting history. He was able to win as a Democrat in Kentucky, which, as you can see, is a deep red state. So that is a very impressive feat to do, which is why some of these states that would generally be more reliably in the Republican Party's column are in the toss-up. We'll get to them later. I do think I've characterized the safe and likely seats. I'll characterize the likely seats for the Republicans next. But these two people are going to be the candidates we'll be going with. So I will add the likely characterization. So as far as the two most likely states, I think Florida probably will end up in the likely column if it were between these two candidates. And then for the other swing states, I do think Ohio is probably the next likely to also end up in the likely column. But for now, I'm going to go with just Florida. And then we'll get to the lean blue states next. So there's going to be a couple of those. I'll go with New Hampshire, Minnesota, Maine, aside from the district here. We'll put the Republican district there into the Republican Party's column. We'll do the other lean Republican states. And then there's going to be a couple lean Republican states. I do think Beshear would have some good Rust Belt appeal. Of course, he is governor from Kentucky, which is part of the Rust Belt. Although J.D. Vance, of course, would also have some appeal. He is, like I mentioned earlier, former senator from Ohio, grew up in the area, and would most likely have some Rust Belt appeal. Ultimately, just with the tides being a little more favorable, quite a bit more favorable to Democrats at the moment, I'm going to put the states of Texas, Iowa, and Ohio into the lean Republican column. Ultimately, they are still ending up in the Republican Party's column and will be 64, plus the district in Maine, 64 electoral college votes. For J.D. Vance, there's actually going to be 65 with the district there in Nebraska, the one outside of the Omaha region. So that's going to be 225 to 219. And then we get to really the core 7 swing states, as well as the swing district there in the Omaha region. I will start out in Nevada and end up in the east. I'm going to add a lean characterization. So I do think Nevada ends up in the lean Democratic Party's column. This state, I think, is one of the more likely ones to revert back to the Democrats. Trump was able to win this state, which was an impressive feat in 2024. He wasn't even able to win it in 2016. Clinton ended up winning it. And then, of course, Biden ended up winning the state in 2020. And I do think at the moment that is one of the most likely states to flip back to the Democratic Party. The state has 2 Democratic senators and a Republican governor, so they've been known to elect people of both parties. So I think it's a legit possibility that it could go into the tilt or possibly even tilt red column. But for now, I'm going to go with the prediction as such. And then we get to the state of Arizona. I'm a little less confident in being in the lean margin. I'm going to put the state of Arizona into the tilt margin. I think Andy Beshear, he's, like I've said before, he was able to prove himself and win an election in a state that is safe red. It is one of the most safe red states in the nation. And that is a very impressive feat. And I do think that if he can appeal to Kentucky, he can appeal to Arizona, Nevada, the Rust Belt, the rest of the Sun Belt, and will probably do well in an election. Plus, right now, we've seen quite a few Democrats succeed in local and some even state-level elections. We'll go to Georgia next, where we've seen Democrats do quite well on some important races during 2025 elections. Nothing too important, but still some notable races that end up in the Democratic Party's control. We also had a couple off-year House elections that have generally shown that Democrats are currently more likely to win most races, have an edge. So I'm going to go with the state of Georgia into the tilt blue column. North Carolina, I think North Carolina would be close. North Carolina hasn't voted blue on the presidential level since 2008. So I think it would take quite a bit. And Andy Beshear, I think, could narrow it up. But ultimately, I think this state would probably end up with J.D. Vance. So that is going to be the first victory J.D. Vance got out of the swing states. And I forgot the district here in Omaha. This one I'm going to put into the lean blue margin. Even Harris was able to win this, and I could easily see Andy Beshear expanding upon this lead by winning the district there. And then that ultimately leaves us with the 3 Rust Belt states. So for J.D. Vance to win, he would have to carry all 3. For Andy Beshear, let's reset to toss-up. For Andy Beshear, he would have to win either Pennsylvania, Michigan. He would have to win one of those 2 states. Winning Wisconsin would bring 269 to 269, which or 260. Let's see here. Let's do the math. So 269 to 269, so that would be a tie. There's kind of a long, complicated process for what happens when that's the case, but ultimately I don't think that will be a concern. Right now I'm going to put the state of Wisconsin definitely in the Democratic Party's column, and then generally the Rust Belt does vote together. I do think Pennsylvania is probably J.D. Vance's best hope for winning a Rust Belt state, aside from the ones that are already characterized. But I ultimately think that the Rust Belt would vote together, especially if Andy Beshear was the Democratic nominee, and that it would end up in the Democratic Party's column. So that is going to be 303 for the Democrat Andy Beshear to 235 for the Republican J.D. Vance. Feel free to reach out, and if you have any questions, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.